The village of Franklin Square, located in western Nassau County, is a suburban community of nearly 30,000 people. Like all communities, Franklin Square is a product of its own unique history. Franklin Square is one piece in the great American mosaic. It has participated in events like the American Revolution, the great waves of immigration, and the coming of the automobile. In fact, the great American poet Walt Whitman taught school in Franklin Square, and the bank credit card was invented here. The story that follows is the story of one American community, our hometown, Franklin Square.
Until the 1800s, Franklin Square was a sparsely settled section of Hempstead Town, originally settled in the 1640s. The earliest European settlers of Franklin Square were of English descent, families like the Elderts and Flowers. Much of Franklin Square was once part of the Hempstead Plains, a vast natural prairie. Beginning in the mid-19th century, German immigrant farmers settled in Franklin Square, developing prosperous vegetable farms. By 1900, most Franklin Square residents were German-speaking farm families. Large farmhouses could be found along Hempstead Turnpike and Franklin Avenue. The leading business in Franklin Square was the Kalb Hotel, built in the mid-1800s at Hempstead Turnpike and New Hyde Park Road. It was a center of social life. Even the local Liederkranz, or singing society, met here.
They had, as you come in the front door, they had a bar, they had a pool table, and then from there, if you went into the dining room, they had a big dining room there, and they had a big kitchen, and then they had rooms upstairs, and as the farmers come from the east to go into New York to the markets, they would stop at this hotel and stay overnight, rent a room, stay overnight. They'd water their horses and rest them while they were waiting.
Another leading local business was Thalma's Meat Market, just north of the hotel on New Hyde Park Road. Schrarer's Hotel, later called Hoffman's Hotel, was located directly across Hempstead Turnpike from Kalb's. Both hotels burned down in the 1920s. In the early 1900s, Hempstead Turnpike was still a narrow road with a trolley line. The Turnpike was Franklin Square's main link to New York City and neighboring Hempstead. Around 1910, Franklin Square began the transition to a suburban community. Farms were subdivided and the first suburban homes built. This was the beginning of suburban growth. 3 building booms in the 1920s, early 1940s, and 1950s ended the rural way of life in Franklin Square forever. In the 1920s, Franklin Square began the transition to a suburban community.
My house was on a dead-end street. My folks bought it thinking that if I chased a ball out into the street, I wouldn't be hit by a car. It has since been cut through, and there's a nursing home on the corner. There had been a farm there years ago with a beautiful old house and a barn, but of course that's all gone now.
Several farms were divided into home sites, and rows of houses were built on Franklin, Madison, and Monroe Streets. Stores were built on Hempstead Turnpike.
And Friday nights on Hempstead Turnpike was the place to go. All the stores were open, and everybody went to the Turnpike on Friday night. And to the
Well, when I first came out, it was in 26, and there were just lots and lots of lots. And then there was one active development went up, but then Depression came, so all building was held until 1937. That was the first building, and the first group that was built was down on Shira Boulevard.
In the late 1930s and early 1940s, another building boom took place, filling northern Franklin Square with homes. The population grew from 3,500 in 1936 to 10,000 by 1942. In the 1950s, a third building boom took place. Almost all the remaining farms were divided into housing developments, such as Forte Homes off Dogwood Avenue, shown here under construction. Franklin Square grew quickly, and for a long time no one thought of setting aside land for a public park. John Rath, a local civic leader, proposed building a park along Foster's Brook in 1938. It was a swampy site, not suitable for home building. This was the future site of Rath Park. Construction began in 1958. Rath Park was designed as one of the finest neighborhood recreation areas in the United States. It boasted ball fields, basketball courts, playgrounds, tennis courts, and of course, a large pool. 10,000 people visited the park on opening day in 1959. A parade and water show were held. Rath Park has been a popular attraction ever since. The southern end of the park houses the Veterans Monument and the Victorian Gazebo, donated to the community by the Bicentennial Committee in 1978. An important activity in any community is education. Franklin Square has its own school district known as School District 17. District 17 dates from the early 1800s. The first schoolhouse built before 1840 was located at the intersection of Dogwood Avenue and Nassau Boulevard. Called the Washington Square School, the great American poet Walt Whitman was teacher here in the spring of 1840. The Washington Square School District took in West Hempstead as well. By 1910, it had become crowded, and West Hempstead was made a separate district. The people of Franklin Square decided to build a new school and bought property on Monroe Street. The new Franklin Square School, or Monroe Street School, was built there in 1912. Monroe Street originally had 8 classrooms. This was the teaching staff in 1914. Monroe Street, enlarged with wings in 1926, was the only school in Franklin Square until in 1936, when population growth led to the construction of John Street School on Nassau Boulevard. But as the village grew, 2 more schools were built in the next decade. Polk Street in 1942. Washington Street School was constructed in 1948 as a kindergarten through 8th grade school, the largest in the district. It opened in 1949. The administrative offices of School District 17 are located in Washington Street School. During the baby boom years, wings were added to John Street and Polk Street School.
And then after the grade school, then I went to had to go to Hempstead High School because Sewanee wasn't built, and went 2 years to Hempstead High School, and then Sewanee was built, and then I finished my schooling in Sewanee High School in 1932.
In 1955, ground was broken for the Franklin Square High School, which was built on a spacious site behind Washington Street School. It was named for H. Frank Carey, a longtime Board of Education president. In 1956, St. Catherine's of Siena School opened. In the 1970s, the student population fell in Franklin Square. Monroe Street School was closed, sold, and torn down. It is fondly remembered by older residents. Franklin Square has always shown a commitment to education. As the District 17 motto states, they are a foundation for excellence. In 1907, a group of farmers from the villages of Franklin Square and Munson organized the Franklin Hook and Ladder Company. They raised money and built the Munson Firehouse on Hempstead Turnpike near McKinley Avenue. The firemen used teams of horses to get to fires. In 1923, a second fire company was organized. the Franklin Square Hose and Chemical Company. Their firehouse was on Hempstead Turnpike near Madison Avenue.
Well, it was right on Hempstead Turnpike with Madison Street. And, well, I had uncles that used to belong to it, 2 uncles that belonged to the fire department.
Over the years, the firemen worked hard, buying new equipment, sharpening their firefighting skills, saving homes, property, and lives, but always serving the community proudly. In 1959, the present fire headquarters was constructed on Liberty Place. Before 1923, Franklin Square had no post office. Mail was picked up at Stringham's General Store in Munson or brought in from Hempstead. In 1923, a small post office opened in Nick Elise's store in the Hoffman Hotel. Residents can pick up their mail and buy stamps.
And I got a job in the post office. And from 1929 until 1971, I was in the Franklin Square Post Office as the assistant postmaster until I retired.
In 1929, Franklin Square was given a fully fledged post office with home mail delivery. The first 2 letter carriers, Sam Hume and John Morton, are shown in this photograph. The present Franklin Square Post Office on Hempstead Turnpike opened in 1961. It handles millions of pieces of mail each year. The Franklin Square Public Library was started by a committee of citizens in 1937. The first library opened in the basement of Monroe Street School in 1939. In 1945, the library moved to a rented storefront in the Hoffman Block on New Hyde Park Road. The present building on Lincoln Road was constructed in 1956. Work proceeding rapidly with groundbreaking, cornerstone laying, and completed library following rapidly. Now computerized and in need of additional space, the library is an important center for community life. In 1926, several local businessmen decided to start a bank in Franklin Square. The bank opened in November 1926 in a storefront on Hempstead Turnpike. Its capital was only $50,000, yet this bank was to grow into one of the largest in the United States. In 1929, the bank constructed its own building at the corner of Hempstead Turnpike and James Street. The bank nearly went out of business during the Depression of the 1930s. Then, Arthur Roth, a young banker, joined the company. His ideas raised the bank to new heights of accomplishment. Roth gained customers for the bank, built an outdoor banking gazebo, started the bank credit card, and encouraged the building of homes. During World War II, customers were told to save for post-war purchases. In 1946, the bank building was greatly expanded, and with the post-war boom, Franklin Square National Bank became the largest bank in Nassau County. Through mergers and growth, the bank rose to become 18th largest in the United States by 1968. Sold to a European interest who looted the bank's money, Franklin collapsed in 1974, the largest bank collapse in U.S. history. Yet the elegant bank building still dominates the downtown area on Hempstead Turnpike. Before 1908, there were no houses of worship in Franklin Square. Many local residents belonged to St. Boniface's Roman Catholic Church in Elmont, a German-speaking congregation. In 1908, Franklin Square Catholics organized their own congregation. The first Mass was held on July 5, 1908 in the Kinsey homestead. Within several months, money was raised and a chapel built. But what to name the new church? The 4 organizers, Mr. Herman, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kalb, and Mr. Kreischer, debated. Then they realized each of their wives was named Catherine, and so the church was named St. Catherine's of Siena. The original chapel was built in 1908 and the rectory in 1914. Father Fahrenkampf was the first resident priest. succeeded by Father Lutz, who greatly expanded the parish, adding a parish hall in 1920 and a magnificent new church in 1926, which even today is regarded as one of the most beautiful on Long Island.
No, I was Walter Boy for Father Lutz at the time, later Monsignor Lutz.
The church had a hall in the back. St. Catherine's Inn had a hall in the back where people would, if they wanted to dance, they would have a dance in there.
Well, you had the parish hall, the St. Catherine's Siena Parish Hall, where we had social functions. They had dances and things like that.
In 1956, St. Catherine's added a Catholic school and convent. The next congregation to be established in Franklin Square was St. James the Just Episcopal Church. A small mission church was constructed in 1914, and the present church in 1955. In 1923, Ascension Lutheran Church was founded. Its first building was located on Courthouse Road and Washington Street. By 1951, the congregation had grown and constructed its present church at Franklin and Plain Avenues. In the 1940s, a number of new religious congregations were established in Franklin Square. The Wesley Methodist Church in 1947, the Orthodox Presbyterian Church in 1941, St. Andrew's Lutheran Church in 1946, and the Franklin Square Jewish Center in 1941. In 1942, the Jewish Center bought the American Legion Hall, which originally been St. Catherine's Chapel. The building was renovated and expanded into the attractive center it is today. One of the newest houses of worship, Bethel Assembly of God, was established in 1956. The Franklin Square Museum was established on April 28, 1976, for the purpose of preserving the history of Franklin Square and surrounding areas. The museum is presently housed in Washington Street School. Its collection boasts over 1,200 photographs, hundreds of artifacts, books, clothing, furniture, and an archive with thousands of documents.
This kerosene lamp dates from about 1913. It was used by the Quinn family in their Monroe Street home before the house was wired for electricity in 1917. This was the only way they had of keeping their house illuminated during those long and dark nights. This small brass cannon was donated to the Historical Society by the Franklin Square American Legion. It used to be in front of the old Legion Hall on Randolph Street. It was used as the opening cannon for the Vanderbilt motor race in Nassau County in the very early 1900s. Benjamin Franklin used to be a prized possession of the Franklin Square National Bank. It used to have its own niche in the bank on Hempstead Turnpike. The bust was found in a basement of a house down in Woodmere and donated to the society some years ago.
The Historical Society is presently working towards the acquisition of a permanent museum building. In the 20th century, Franklin Square has changed from a small farming village to a community of nearly 30,000 people. In only several decades, housing, schools, houses of worship, businesses, public parks, and buildings have filled the open fields. Franklin Square, Long Island, USA, our hometown.